30 frames per second for a cinematic feel. No thank you. Give me a game that plays well and looks good. Thanks. So it's a very common thing recently among developers that say 30 frames per second gives you a more cinematic feel. Recently, the Order 1888, I believe it's called, had a comment on the issue saying 24 frames per second is what movies use, which is correct, that's what they use, and that looks very cinematic. However, 24 frames per second is not fun to play, but 30 is. So we're shooting for 30, blocking our game at 30 for a cinematic feel. Okay, this is the issue I have. This is my issue, my opinion, and I hope, I find some common ground here, of course, but you are entitled to your opinion. I can play 30 frames per second without any issues, okay? 30 frames per second, as long as I'm not coming straight off of 60 frames, is completely playable, completely justifiable. It's fine, especially on consoles. 60 frames is the preferable option. Now, I get that if the hardware of the Xbox One, PlayStation 4, and I'm not going to say Wii U because they're mostly first-party games and they usually run how the developers can see. They can push it to the limit there, but there aren't many first-party games on Sony or Microsoft's consoles. So I'm going to be focusing more on them. Limiting your game because of hardware is understandable. The standards for graphical fidelity are major. People want to see great-looking games. They don't want to go back to an age where, models were half-rendered, and not half-rendered, but, had very little detail to them and had blocks for hands. We don't want to see that anymore. And that's understandable, you sacrifice your frame rate for a better-looking game, so that you can push out 1080p, 30 frames per second. That's completely justifiable. The hardware is limited, and with time, people will figure out how to trick the system into running better looking games with less system resources. But that's a ways off right now. The consoles are still fairly new. In regards to locking your game at 30 because it's cinematic, when you have the option to allow 60 frames per second, is just quite frankly bullshit. That is not true. Anybody who's a gamer, who is a legitimate gamer and isn't a movie fanatic thinking they know what they're talking about with games, knows for a fact that 60 is always preferable. One of the games that I recently sat down and played, or tried to play, was The Last of Us. I had the PS3 copy, sat down, started playing it. I got probably around a chapter in, or whatever, a section into the game, before I had to stop playing. Why? Because the frame rate was sub 30 most of the time. Now, I probably would have sat down, completely played through that game, and sucked it in. It was a good game, and I was very excited to play it. However, there's a PS4 version, and we own a PS4 in my household. So, with that in mind, considering that's a better looking game and it runs at 60 frames per second, I thought, completely superior version will look better and play better. Why am I not going for that? So I put down my PS3 version, gave it to a friend because he enjoyed it very much, and I'm going to get the PS4 version and play through that myself because it's a great game from what I'm seeing, and I enjoyed the little bit I played of it. But I then also saw, when the game had come out for the PlayStation 4, that news articles such as Polygon, I believe, was one of them. Kotaku, I saw it on as well. Though don't quote me on Kotaku. I could be completely mistaken on that. I do not wish to offend anyone. When it comes to, we recommend locking the game at 30 for a more cinematic experience. Why? The game was reported completely stable at 60 frames per second. Why would you lock it at 30? Why? You are limiting your capabilities in that game if you are locking yourself at 30 frames per second. you're making yourself a worse gamer so that the game stutters. So that the game doesn't look as smooth. That just baffles my mind. I don't know. Again, with consoles, it's understandable that the games would lock themselves at 30. That's fine. But now I'm going to move on to the PC argument. And before you claim PC Master Race, I own all three new consoles, and I play on them whenever, I have free time and such. When it comes to the PC, let's look at a game called Assassin's Creed Unity. Assassin's Creed Unity is running at 30 frames per second at 900p on both consoles. Okay. Whatever, they're trying to avoid debates and stuff. Let's quote, I'm quoting, that's actually what happened. And whatever, right? I'm not going to go into that right now. That's not anything. I'll get into an Ubisoft rant later on. And boy, I have a lot to say about Ubisoft. But apparently they came out with an article or a quote recently stating that Microsoft and Sony are pressuring them to keep the PC version locked at 30 frames per second so that it doesn't outshine their console ports. You serious? Really? You want to do that shit after Watch Dogs? Your community will tear you apart on PC. You already treat them like crap. Uplay is a disgusting piece of software. I don't know what to say. Ubisoft has been known to treat their PC market wrong. They don't go out of their way to harm the PC market for sure, but their ports are normally shoddy. And, that could be said for a majority of, honestly, console ports. Because, ironically enough, games are developed on a computer for console, but the PC version is then also shoddy. It baffles my mind. I don't know the technical reasons behind it, but it excludes a majority of people who play on PC with people who have bought a PC. And that, let me tell you, game developers, this is a little hint, a little secret. The PC market is gonna be buying your games with revenue to you years from now. There are games from 2003, 2004 being bought now on Steam with the developers still getting some money. Sure, they're being sold at a lower price, but they're also like 10 years old. There's something you'd put money into years ago and you're making money off of it still. It's published on Steam. You see, if Steam does a sale, recently, it was pointed out to me that Crysis 2 was being bought on Steam due to a rise in it due to a sale. The developers were making money off of the Crysis 2 deal. I don't see a problem with this. It's a good PC port. Oh, it's a good PC game. I'm not gonna say port. That one was actually pretty decent. So it was a good game. And it sold. And you could tell. The PC market will grant you most of your longevity in terms of sales. Because once you run out of physical hardware and discs, which a good majority of people still buy discs, you are going to not gain any revenue from the games being sold used. Digital marketing is key, and where is that strongest? On the PC. What do you do to fix that? You stop making shoddy ports that limit us to 30 frames per second. When our machine should be the one deciding what our frame rate is, what our graphical fidelity is. We should be given, as PC gamers, the maximum potential your game can offer. And when we don't, you're to blame. Not the PC. And before you go PC Master Race, I'm for all gamers. We're all gamers here. I've been Ave of Chaotic Reunion, and I'll see you all next time.